Thank you for joining me for the Let My People Go webinar. As you know, each month we're trying to explore what it means to fight human trafficking by loving those most vulnerable. And today I have a special guest joining. His name is Steve Corbett. Steve is an associate professor of community development in the Department of Economics at Covenant College. He also serves as a community development specialist for the Chalmers Center. You may know him as a co-author of the book When Helping Hurts. Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, glad to be with you guys.
And so, Steve, as we have talked kind of offline, and now we're discussing. Now, we've been talking about really how Christians can approach those most vulnerable and how we can really approach them in terms of charity. But I think sometimes we don't really even think through, what does charity mean? Could you help us, just for the purposes of the conversation, could you really help us define what is charity?
Yeah, so if you go by the dictionaries, and it's the kind of basically providing stuff for people in need. And as you get deeper into the definition, it'll talk about, you use the word relief. So it's very much of, I see somebody that's needy and I give to them. As far as the kind of charity we're talking about, there's charity of attitudes towards people and that kind of stuff. But as far as like doing charity, it's very much kind of a provider-receiver relationship.
Now, I have seen kind of the semantics here shift. A lot of people have been using the term charity for years.
Sure.
But now I'm hearing people talk in terms of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
How could empowerment and charity be different, or are they different?
Yeah, I think they're really different. I mean, part of the hard things is, just in our tax codes, we talk about charitable organizations and all that. So that's why that word is just so big out there. It's, been around forever. And so a lot of organizations that would say, maybe even yours, we're not a charity organization, we're doing something different, still have that label around you, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea of empowerment is just people being better, able to look at their situations, their conditions, whether it's at an individual or household or a whole community, and say, we want to get from where we are, from point A to point B, we want this step forward of improvement, making that decision, and then having the ability to act on it. It's really that simple. It's people just advancing in their lives, advancing their abilities to kind of analyze, to make decisions that are healthy, and then having the opportunity, the abilities, the resources, the power, all the different things to actually act on those. So when we talk about organizations that are, in the empowerment work, if you want to put it that way, we're just trying to create the environments for that to happen. I'm a big fan of Bob Lupton and the CCDA guys and Robert Lithicum, and they both say, and Mary Nelson, all those guys say, nobody can empower anybody else. But at the end of the day, people have to take those steps. You can help that process be easier. In major in community development, we talk about our students. You're going to go, if you work at the grassroots, you're going to be a facilitator, from the French facile, to make easy. So how do we help it, make it easier for people to experience empowerment? That's our task.
And I love how you just worded that, because oftentimes, and our organization included, we use the term empowerment almost as a buzzword.
Sure.
And when we're using it, we know what we mean.
Right.
But I think sometimes other people may not know exactly what the nonprofit leader means by the use of the word empowerment. And so you're saying something to the effect of, we are going to empower those most vulnerable.
Right. That's
great. But as we're discussing here, I don't have the power to empower you to do
right. Anything. It's not your decision ultimately, right?
Yeah.
It's just not your decision, all there is to it. So yeah, it's a small twist. So I don't want us to pound on people for the terms they're using, but I do think it's really important, this distinction of who at the end of the day has authority over a person's life. It's their own people themselves, families themselves, communities themselves. And that's the whole language of, Bryant Myers, walking with people versus doing for people. And it's not walking in front of them, pulling them along. It's not behind them, pushing them ahead. It's really just maybe walking alongside, or maybe sometimes I even talk to a lot of people say, maybe we need to walk about 2 steps backward and to the side. We're there, but we're, you know, our presence is not so overpowering that we accidentally are leading, even though we think we don't want to be or don't think we are. Yeah.
It's interesting because as we're talking, we've used the word empowered, we've used the word overpowering. What is the role of power in creating an atmosphere of empowerment?
Wow, that's a loaded question, brother. How Marxist do you want me to be? I mean, I mean, I'm in the evangelical world, right? I'm kind of a reformed evangelical environment, and we don't think a lot about power, you know. And what's funny is people who have power don't think about power a lot because it's just there.
Right.
People who don't have power are really aware of the limitations they have. So I think we have to wake up better to that and be more aware of that. And this is not a political statement at all. I mean, it can get into those things, but you know, community organizing, when I think, for me, my background is the boundary between community organizing and community development is pretty permeable. A lot of the same dynamics, a lot of the same principles. But you know, at the root, community organizing says it's about either holding people that have power more accountable to using it well, but also enhancing people's power who don't have enough. And they go certain directions. But even in community development, at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're saying you are, you know, you're your own agent. Stephen Mott wrote a great piece years ago called A Theology, what do you call it? Theology of Power. And he talks about we're all born with something called preserving power, the ability to act. We sometimes would call that free will, right? Mm-hmm. The fall happened, and that got all messed up, and people started exploiting others and all that. So we had this kind of oppressive, exploitive stuff, and sometimes people even buy into the lies that I'm less than, so I let you exploit me. You know, I need you to come and fix me and help me because I'm helpless, and all really weird ways it works out. And so Mott says, you know, the role of the gospel, and therefore the role of God's people in the church, is to have what's called intervening power, to help people have their quote unquote preserving power, power of being, power of will restored. It's not fixing them. It's not taking them from A to B. It's not just putting roofs on houses to have roofs on houses. It's people being restored to be kind of be able to have free exercise of the will. And then hopefully as you walk with them, help them use that well, right?
Yeah, I like that. And as we're talking, I'm also thinking about this idea of power and how it relates to the person who's walking alongside mm-hmm. of those who are most vulnerable in their community. You know, it's like, I think sometimes, I loved how you said a lot of times people with power may not know that they have it.
Right.
Whereas people who are vulnerable,
extremely aware.
They are very aware. They know what they're lacking. And
right.
So I think as we are engaging people who may have different needs than we do, if we are not attuned to our power, we could accidentally exploit them. Would you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely. You know, oftentimes in these uneven power dynamics, we make a suggestion, but it's received as a command, right? We just, hell, think about this, but the person feels like, wow, I got to pay attention to you. You own the purse strings. You know, I want this from the program. And if I kind of don't do what you say and act like you want, I don't get the things I really do want. And, you know, you may be saying, hey, let's go do this activity. And I'm like, oh, it's not that important to me, but I'll do it because maybe that'll help me eventually get the things, you know, that I do want out of you and from you and with you and all of that stuff. In our book, unfortunately, this idea of making suggestions that come across as commands, we labeled the Donald Trump effect. This is 2012. We never thought 2016 was quite going to happen. So people will pick it up now and go, hold it. What do you got? Do you like Trump or not? I mean, that's not the point, right? But that kind of you know, that idea of just tremendous authority to walk in. So yeah, I think that's happening all the time. People who experience trauma, I mean, you're working with people, you know, coming out of trafficking who've been deeply traumatized, and they are outrageously sensitive to not having control. So their radar out of where's the power dynamics here is off the charts. And so you might say, hey, why don't you come to this meeting and do this? And you just think it's a nice idea. That may come across as you're telling me what to do. When I'm told, when I don't have the power to make my own decisions, I've got hurt in the past, so I don't show up, or whatever it is, right? Those dynamics are just so deeply at play.
And then when you're the person in the church and you have asked that person to show up and
Right.
they didn't reciprocate your kindness because you paid their electric bill and now
Right.
they're not coming to church.
Right.
And you start thinking, oh, well, they used us. All the
Yep,
while,
totally.
you're thinking about your needs. You're not thinking about their needs. You're not
Right.
walking a mile in their shoes. And I feel
Right.
like we do this all the time.
Right. One of my daughters has been working with homeless women and their kids the last almost 10 years now. And I've really learned a lot about trauma from her, because about 85% of homeless women in America have been traumatized before the age of 12, usually physically, most often sexually. And that just plays out in a whole sets of behaviors. So my daughter's working with these ladies now in their late teens and early 20s. And, you know, she's had to learn not just to look at the decisions they're making today, you know, and just shake her head and go, man, you're screwing up your kids' lives. She's got to think, what was that girl when she was 8 years old? And if I was there when she was being victimized, you know, I would be right by her, right? Fighting for her, everything and I could possibly do. And just helping kind of appreciate that. Now, that's just not everybody we work with, so I don't want to overstate this, but just, I think the point you're bringing is we do need to be really aware of the power we may hold as kind of a middle-class Americans. That if you get into the ethnic stuff, or, you know, white middle-class Americans, and then we can add on the male stuff and, you know, all those kinds of different dynamics. There's different ways that we've been granted authorities that would never think it's been granted to us, but maybe it has. And so we have to be just extremely, we can be bossy without meaning it. We can be threatening without even thinking that's at all what we're about. And just knowing that that's a possibility, maybe we go gentler. It also means we go a lot slower, and we're okay with slowness. One of my favorite phrases that Bryant Myers has in his book, Walking with the Poor, is that development is, or empowerment, or whatever term you want to use, is it happens at 3 miles an hour. I encourage you to go and get in your car and try to drive 3 miles an hour. You'll want to get out and walk, because it's so infuriatingly slow.
Yeah.
And he even makes the comment that God is often a 3 mile an hour God. You know, he's working, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah, he can walk in and do miraculous things in a moment, that's for sure, and he does. We're just not really patient enough for that slowness of things, and seeing, you know, maybe one life advanced a little bit. Now, we want to see 50 people move from here to here in 2 years, and, you know, get a good return of our investment of our time and our money. And that's those attitudes, those kind of that God complex attitudes, I think are really dangerous. You know, we're not running a factory here where you can demand that kind of performance.
And I think that's the trick, because most of us, when we're in church, we want to provide something that serves the community.
Right.
And so it's honestly easier to do that through programs.
Sure.
But when you start thinking through programs, then you have metrics that you need to meet.
Right.
Then
Right.
you have, you know, you have goals, and if you're not meeting those goals, the program can be done away with, or you can lose your job if you're managing that program.
Right. Totally. Yep.
And I think for me, I love what you're saying. Well, when you're quoting Bryant Myers about God moves at 3 miles an hour, because this is beautiful, and I think this is true, but this gets in the way of our desire to fix people quickly.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because I'd be lying if I haven't had that desire when I was working with people, and when I'm talking with someone and they're not able to change their situation, and I'm like, or they don't want to change their situation in that moment, rather,
Mm-hmm.
they're able. I believe that they're able, but maybe there's some things that they're
Right.
beat down, they're hurt, and I'm thinking, get it together. Let's move
Right.
on. Come on.
Right.
And because I'm thinking from a position of power. I'm thinking,
Sure.
I haven't experienced what they've experienced.
Right.
And so how do our churches become atmospheres of empowerment? How do we transition to get there?
Oh, if I had the magic wand, I'd write that book, make $1 billion, and then rest. okay, I'd give away, 990 million. I want to keep 1 million, okay, just so I can get Red Sox season tickets. But there is not an easy answer to that. I think the conversation we're having is important. I think getting people ready to look at your own life. Look how, yes, you've made progress in parts of your life, but look at your own life of the things that are still part of you that wish weren't there. I mean, that's just life. It's a broken world. Brian, my co-author, Brian Fickert, I mean, it seems like a day doesn't go by. He doesn't say the fall really happened, just to keep reminding us, this is one really screwed up place. Christ came to bring redemption. He's at work. The kingdom has come and is coming and it will come. So there's hope, but you got to be really careful. And I think Brian says it in his book. If not, I just picked it up somewhere, but I think it's in his book. Our work is not about being successful. It's about being faithful. That's the biggest thing I tell my students. I said, most of what you do, the programs you're in, are going to have more failure than success.
Wow.
But that's not the point. The point is to be faithful, to do the right things the right way. God will take care of the rest. And so I'm my little church, and we're doing benevolence, and we're trying to do it well. My big thing is, we are faithfully putting forth opportunities for people. If they don't want to take advantage of them, that's not our call, right? Our call is to be faithful at providing things that are, opportunities that are really helpful. My deacons sometimes they're great guys. They get a little discouraged of, people coming for help. And it's like, and we start talking about, well, let's sit down and, are you willing to look at some of the deeper causes behind why you can't be paying your rent or why these things? And so few people want to do that. So they can get discouraged, but the ones or two or a few families that do, man, we get really engaged. And you just have to be okay with that. So the faithfulness versus success.
So what would you tell?
But donors don't want that because,
Right.
write a grant, brother, and say, yeah, we're going to be faithful. Give us the money, right? But you can measure that actually. You can measure doing the things that are the right things that provide, like Bob says, the kind of the conditions for empowerment to occur. You can be held accountable for doing that. You can't be held accountable for how many people actually change.
What would you tell the person who is laboring at their church, serving people who are in need, trying to walk with them, but they're seeing this person and they're seeing that this person does not seem to be ready to change or to grow or is not necessarily picking up what this other person's laying down. And now that this person who's so caring and they really want to serve, they're starting to just get exhausted and blaming themselves and just feeling like failures. What would you tell this person to do? So
I'd probably sit down with them and ask them, what are you doing? And as part of your faithfulness, praying hard for this person, and probably end up saying, you're doing all the right things. The fact that people aren't changing isn't your deal. It's not your call. It's getting your eyes, that great civil rights documentary, Eyes on the Prize. We got to be looking at the right prize, and the prize is not success. The prize is actually not even change lives, because we just don't have the power to do that. That's ultimately the Holy Spirit's work. But we can be faithful, and we can ask. And I have a lot of these discussions with people who come through sometimes, and people that are out there that are working, and you get tired. So let's back up. Where's the root of your tiredness? And maybe you've just got the wrong goals.
Wow.
And, the work you're doing, holy cow. You're going to see a lot of stuff not come through that you just wish so much for people. What you want is really good. There's nothing wrong with that, right? What you want is really, really beautiful and good. It may not happen in very many people's lives, but you can be intentional about doing all you can do. And I think actually if we do that more, people will sense that we're working with. And maybe that takes, I don't know. I have a sense that takes them realizing I'm just being treated as a human being here versus as another participant in the program or whatever. So I don't know.
I love how you say we have to change the prize.
Right.
Moving from this idea of we need to succeed to we need to be faithful. And I think that's incredible, because at the end of the day, success centers everything we're doing on our own efforts. Faithfulness is relying on Christ's efforts for us.
Sure.
And yeah, like, I think that actually centers us as we're doing what can feel like an impossible job.
So, one of the things that I teach a class on culture and all these different ideas like cultural norms. And one of them is the idea of locus of control, kind of what's in control of the world and life and your life. And there's the idea of internal locus of control and external. And internal is I'm the master of my own destiny. I should be solving my own problems. If I screw up, then I should be held accountable. But if I succeed, I should get the rewards for that. All that. But it's really much, I can get anything done. External locus control says, you know what, this life, it's complex. My ability to actually control things is fairly limited. And so I have to be better at accepting these realities. Now that has a downside, right? The downside of that is sometimes we call it fatalism. You actually settle for things when you don't actually could change, they could be changed. But Americans on the scale of the world and we are the most extreme internal locus of control nation on the face of the earth. And so that's pounding in us all the time. And our Christianity doesn't get rid of all that. And so we're just constantly saying, yes, we can, yes, we can, yes, we can fix this. If we just get the right curriculum, the right program, the right personnel, the right whatever. And that, I think we need to back off that a little bit. It doesn't stop us from working hard and thinking hard and planning hard. None of that, that's not what I'm saying. But it's accepting we're limited way more than I think we think, and actually being able to see things change. And again, when we're talking about people changing, we're not talking about building a house. My goodness, that's but we take some of those same mentalities and we bring it into the working with people changing their lives, and especially people who've had some really hard things and are hard situations. And I think that's not helpful, having that sense of we can do this, we can fix this. It's one of the problems with short-term missions. Americans show up somewhere and within 30 minutes, they got the whole community diagnosed. And it's actually not bad diagnoses. I mean, it's like, yeah, if this was this would be better. But that's a whole different world than those people being better able to get there themselves with you walking with them.
Well, and it can also be disempowering. I mean, piggybacking on the short-term missions trip example, I've had friends who've said, hey, we're going to such and such a place and we're going to build water purifiers or we're going to dig wells, or we're going to, insert whatever cool justice fad is going on. And they're like, we're going to do this. And my question is always, are you sourcing locally? Are you talking to the people that are working there? And honestly, the people that have talked to me about this recently, they are. And I think that's really a beautiful thing, because that can be empowering. But I think sometimes when we're trying to, you're going to see what I'm doing here. When we're trying to help people, Steve, we can actually hurt them.
Wow, that'd be a great title for a book.
Wouldn't it? That'd be an amazing book title. I can see it now, When Helping Hurts. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it's like when we do that, we can accidentally be disempowering people. And so what are some ways that we may be disempowering people without even thinking about it?
Wow. Wow. I think that question is almost impossible to ask, because I got 10 different contexts in my head. I would say in general, I'm teaching a course right now on principles and practices of community development, and whether it's international, US, very different tools, different language. But at the end of the day, the principle is always about people being able to make their own decisions as to what they'd like to see. And then you making the decision, do we want to be part of helping them get there? Because not all decisions are for healthy things. And so whatever you're doing, whose idea was it? So you're going to put in community gardens. I'll try not to roll my eyes too much, because I've seen this fad come and go. And I'm a gardener. I'm a farm boy from Vermont. I love all that stuff. I've not found too many communities in urban America that on their top 10 list of what they want to do to improve their community is to have a community garden. But they're all over the place. because outsiders think it's cool.
Mm.
And this latest generation of hipsters thinks it's cool, like I did back in my day. We got to start with what people desire for themselves and then ask the questions, can we be part of helping that happen? And not coming in with our water filters. And in my day, it was solar cookers. You know, it's always been something. This is going to solve it. And that's the wrong starting point. It's starting where people are. So like in our church, I was talking about earlier, when, you know, a person comes and wants to help with their bill, we sit down with them and say, you know, find out a little bit more, and we find out this is kind of a systemic issue here. There's something going on deeper than they just had something come up unexpectedly that caused them to be short that month. And those things happen. And in those cases, you tend to help with a bill a lot. But when it's deeper, then we sit down and say, okay, where do you want to be in 3 months from now with this issue financially? And 9 times out of 10, people are going to say, well, I'd love to be able to pay my rent on time. Well, okay, what are you doing to get there? And so it starts with what they want and what they're doing to get there. And then you can say, well, this is where I think we could come alongside you as a church to help you succeed in this. As you move forward, maybe we can be there with you to help remove some obstacles, to create some opportunities. But it's your idea, right? And you're the initiator. And if you can't come up with the idea, then we're not going to tell you what you should do. We're just not going to do that, because that doesn't work. And then when you lay out, I'd like to get here in 3 months, I'm going to try to do this and this. And if you don't do it, then we just say, okay, well, we'll wait until you're ready to do that. And is there a problem that we could help with why you couldn't do it? You want to, but there's just some obstacles you weren't thinking of. But it's who's in the driver's seat. That's the biggest issue. Who's in the driver's seat the whole way along? You're working with people that are coming out of sex trafficking. You know, what do they want? What don't they want?
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you say that, because you kind of touched on ethical storytelling as well in what you just said, because oftentimes we can be disempowering with the way that we share our stories of success.
Absolutely. Yep. And the pictures we use and all of that stuff, right? The video footage. Absolutely.
Now, any advice there for people who, because I've heard people say it like this, they say, well, if you're thinking about it and you actually care about telling a story ethically, you're going to find yourself, yes, you're going to make mistakes in storytelling, and you're going to tell flat stories that may not capture the beauty of the human that you are telling the story about. But more often than not, you are going to defer to that person. I feel like with what I do, a lot of the stories that I tell, they're co-creations. They're me sitting down with someone and saying, what do you want me to write about?
Right, right.
What do you want me to not say?
Right.
I'm going to let you look at this before I publish.
Absolutely.
Any advice for us as we're in churches and we want to celebrate these praises? We want to celebrate what God's doing in the life of this person that we've been helping.
Right. So, that's a great thing you're putting forth. So what if we went to somebody that we wanted to share about the church, about this, and asked them, could we share? Get permission. They might say yes, they might say no. To say, we're excited for what's going on in your life. And we want to celebrate you, not us and what we've done for you, but we want to celebrate you. That's a little twist, right? So you don't talk so much about what our church did, but just look at this person who's God's working in, and praise God that we get to be part of that.
We want to celebrate you.
Right.
Or even say, hey, if you would like to share on something,
sure.
Or if you're afraid to do that, you could write some words and we could share those.
Right. Absolutely.
But we want to celebrate what God's doing in your life, because this gives us hope that he could work in our lives.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow. Steve, that's good. That's really good. And I feel like that's really tangible, because all of us, no matter whether we're leading organizations or pastoring churches, we're trying to figure it out.
Sure.
And each person is different. This isn't some formula that once we figure it out, everything is easy.
Right.
It's a process, and people work is difficult. So
one thing though, I don't want to, hear people hear out of this conversation is that programs have no place.
That's good.
But they can be vehicles for this, right? I mean, so
Absolutely.
there was a jobs preparedness program that, you know, kind of a church-based, faith-based one that our church has done a few times. That was the vehicle by which we got to walk with some people, right? And it created a context for us to get to know people and all that, and around something that they cared about, right? So don't hear that programs in and of themselves are like evil. We're just supposed to be walking around and drinking chai and kind of just hanging out, and it's all this organic. And no, I mean, but understand the program. Just doing the program isn't in itself the success we're looking for, or even that's all. So, I love programs.
I had a community minister at a church once come up to me and said, "Well, he said, Raleigh, you and I are going to have completely different views on this." And I said, "Okay, first of all, what are we going to have completely different views on?" He's like, "We're going to have completely different views on the fact that you love programs," which it's not exactly accurate, but I am all about programs that work and that prioritize the person.
Right.
But because like you, I think that programs can be a vessel for this, but as he was saying, he goes, "Well, you know, we just need to be organic and just let things happen." And I said, "I hear you. But I think there is a world in which we live where we can be organic and organized."
Sure, absolutely.
You know, we can do both of those. And so for us, when we're working with churches, we're trying to help them kind of toe that line and say, you know, we don't want to treat people like projects. We want to treat them as people. But, you know, we can also have some goals.
Sure.
But we don't have to beat ourselves up if we don't meet those goals, because this is a slow moving thing. You know, it's going to take a little while.
Well, it's just like you have activity goals and then you have output goals, right? And then you have impact goals. This whole idea of, I can do the activity, we can run this training, we can do this, we can do these things. And those are good, they're essential, they're just not sufficient. It's what came out of those. And then ultimately, what did that end up doing on longer term? And so it's keeping in mind there's multiple levels here of evaluation of what's going on.
Man. Well, Steve, this has been good. I've really appreciated what you've had to say, and you've given me a lot to think about. And I know that those who are watching, you've really challenged them. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, brother. My pleasure.
All right. Well, I look forward to catching up with you soon. And thanks again.
Good luck finishing your book, brother.
I know, right?
I think you're doing this just as an excuse not to be writing right now. So get back to work.
That's probably exactly true.
It's amazing how many things I get done around the house right before book deadlines, right? Any excuse not to write.
That's exactly what's happening. I think that's exactly what's happening. But no, finishing the book, turning it into the publisher on Tuesday, and then we're done.
There you go. All right, Brad. Have a great Thanksgiving.
All right, you too.
Okay. Bye-bye, brother.